Our relationship with language is clearly changing. Generative AI is augmenting the way we create text, image, sound, what have you. I decided to try and incorporate it consistently into my regular activities for a week. And in this video, I'll be sharing my experience and what I learned. Firstly, a little disclaimer. I work at Cohere, one of the platforms that I'm talking about in this video. I work on the mass adoption of the latest language technology called large language models, but the views expressed on generative AI in this video are my personal ones. Also, I want to give you a heads up that it's going to be a very subjective and selective account of my testing generative AI models and products. For example, I have an avatar from Synthesia. I also have a voice model from the script. I sometimes use these to create the videos or introductions to the videos, but they are not part of my daily routine. So I kept those aside and used only stuff that I would apply to my day-to-day. One thing you should know about me is that I am your typical knowledge worker and a creator, for lack of a better word. I process and communicate information for a living. Most of my days when I'm at work, and even when the biggest sparks fly, look pretty much like this. I am rather attached to having my writing done by me. I wrote dozens of essays, a thesis, tons of YouTube scripts, and finally, recently a book on GPT-3, and all of that without support from the text generation models. I am also an avid reader. Margaret Atwood, Ursula Le Guin, science fiction, fiction, non-fiction. I crave literature. My brain gets a unique type of stimulation from a phenomenally written novel or an essay or a biography. Even a Twitter thread these days will do. Reading and writing are highly important modalities for interacting with the world for me. I'm on a nomadic trip since 2023 started. I've been to Dubai, Bangkok, smaller Thai islands, Bali, and eventually ended up in Sydney. So my story starts in Bali. On the first day, I looked at my calendar and my list of to-dos. My schedule is quite jammed, and I was just being super conscious of my time. I wanted to use AI where I needed it most, and first up was actually sitting down with a YouTube scenario. So I was just starting the process of making a video on prompt engineering. Since I was already using a text generation model to get some outputs from my prompts, I asked it to help me generate a YouTube video script about prompt engineering tips. And I used Cohere command model to illustrate how prompt engineering works. I kept generating for well more than an hour. It was pretty fun. And it was a win-win. I was showing how different prompts work while getting more and more content and ideas for how to structure my actual video. Then came the harder part of curating the end version of the video script. And here I had a couple of thoughts. What it helped me the most with was to get going. I felt like my script is coming together faster than otherwise would. I could more or less heavily edit outputs whenever I wanted to. I could combine the best elements of multiple options. At some point though, after X alternations of my text, I started losing my sense of direction. There were clearly too many okay ways to say what I tried to say, and the model provided a cacophony of voices. Now, it's not like it doesn't happen to you without a collab with text generation. It does. But here it's amplified by
being able to look at all these different versions within seconds.
I ended up using quite substantially the AI write-ups. It became a collage of my initial pointers and the text generation ideas I felt pretty good about. I recorded the video and then I took my time editing it. While hearing myself, I felt it didn't quite sound like me. It was sort of too generic, so I was cutting through it. Towards the end, no matter how much editing I did, I still did feel that my script is somewhat compromised. Here you can see me late into the evening, still unhappy, captured by my rather amused boyfriend. I wasn't sold on the idea of using AI-generated video scripts. On the second day, I was wrapping up my work on the video thumbnail. I used DreamStudio, the playground from Stability AI. I already had some ideas of what I needed. I did the heavy lifting of putting most of the elements together, and what I needed was a cool background. I started generating rather liberally and then approximating towards the better outputs. I quickly came up with the direction I wanted to take and thought will work, but it took me way over an hour to get a usable version of that for the thumbnail. Most of the time, it was just a little bit too raw, a little bit too blurred, a little bit too weird, so I kept generating until it looked fine. Two things happened with DreamStudio. One, it did deliver on the image inspiration. I wouldn't have otherwise found or come up with this cool interpretation of the vibe I wanted to achieve, otherwise with stock images, for example. Two, I was able to approximate the result I was happy with. And although it took many iterations, I got there pretty confidently in the end. When I was done, I presented two versions of the thumbnail to my boyfriend. He chose the AI-generated version, and so I figured the mission was successful. On the third day, I was planning to write social media posts about the video. Usually, I make a post about it on LinkedIn and Twitter to let others know what I've been cooking. These posts are pretty time-consuming. I was really happy to try and automate it with Generative AI. I opened HyperWrite and inputted my video description. The platform generated a bunch of very useful ideas. Some of them I felt more comfortable with than the others, and most of them I wouldn't have time or patience to write myself, but they did sound good. I did some editing, but not too heavy, and it was ready to go. Similarly, I used HyperWrite to put together a Twitter thread. Normally, I just didn't have time and the patience to do it, but then it came together pretty fast and it did look good to go. Satisfied, I hit publish and then waited for the outcomes. This was one of my best performing LinkedIn posts about my YouTube video, and my Twitter thread did well as well. I still believe that the posts could have been written better, but considering that I usually wing it, this was a clear upgrade. On the fourth day, I started using ChatGPT to help me brainstorm and write the script for this very video you're watching right now. I generated a bunch of scenarios to begin with, and one of them had an example about using RunwayML for my Instagram. Now, initially I wasn't planning on using Runway, but then I figured, hell, why not? Let's do it. Actually, it didn't occur to me at first, but I have used RunwayML in the past. Back in the days, I did some crude GAN style transfer experiments. It was great to see that they have grown so much since then. I checked out all the new options that are possible with Runway. I chose one of my pictures to play with. Here you see me in a rice paddy in Bali, erasing myself with Runway, and generating a fluffy pink bear instead. Not bad, I thought, looking at the result. I could definitely do better, but I was too impatient to get it out there. I used Jasper to do the image caption for it. I hit publish and went for a swim. On day 5, I took off to Sydney. Wow, testing AI is more intense than I expected, I thought. While traveling, I was just reading and listening to favorite podcasts. I was really grateful for being able to rest and process all this. I pretty much hit the ground running in Sydney. By day 6, I was starting to feel really comfortable exploring generative AI models for my regular stuff. It was time to use it at work. One of my colleagues was using a tool for generating meeting summaries, and so I figured I'm gonna go for that one. I used a tool called Tactic to record and analyze a conversation that was brainstorming ways to tackle a new challenge. I can't tell you much more about it, but it was a conversation with a bunch of very creative folks who were coming up with really good ideas really fast. Tactic was present during the meeting, recorded it, and came up with action points. The action points turned out quite good. The summary did not. I have then used these decent enough action points to go about tackling that particular challenge we were discussing, which is not a bad start. It was actually helpful, and I could implement something from Tactic. One thing I noticed is that I was more relaxed during the meeting, not having to take my own notes, but that coupled with having to review the entire convo again and checking against my AI output's quality wasn't a great time saver. Later that day, I finally kicked off my email writing automation process. I spent a few hours using HyperWrite to respond to my emails that day. It can still be optimized, but is already very useful, especially when I give it few bullet points of what to include in a given email. On the final day, I continued with my email generation assistant as expected. I also wrote a social media post promoting my book with the help of AI. Finally, I put together this episode using bits and pieces of the script version generated by ChatGPT, deleting most of its outputs, frankly, but I kept the story structure and the RunwayML experiment suggestion. Looking back at this week, I think it's really good to go and stretch yourself using generative AI in places that make sense to you, even if you don't feel comfortable with it. If it doesn't stick, although it might, it will still give you some food for thought. Image generation, for example, was a lot of fun, and I know that I will keep playing with it. I am really looking forward to more video and 3D generation features to include in my YouTube aesthetics and my social media. What I am going to use for sure moving forward are email and social media post automation. In terms of creative writing, I will be using AI to perhaps brainstorm ideas and create initial raw outline. I know though that I am not planning to automate the writing itself anytime soon. I kept editing my AI generations until I was semi-satisfied, and I didn't feel like I achieved the result faster, it got better, or I enjoyed the process. And although I can imagine that in the future AI will get better at writing more personalized to our unique style and way of thinking stuff, I still feel like there is something really unique about human thinking that I don't think will become obsolete for a very long time. I really love this quote from Paul Graham: "Reading won't be obsolete till writing is, and writing won't be obsolete till thinking is." The AI outputs typically are a cacophony of generic voices. For my writing and thinking, I really need to feel engaged. And it needs to have a soul. Thanks for watching. See you next time.